Serious? Children born as a result of rape. What was it like growing up? How did you find out? I found out when I was about the age of 12. My mother had a psychological breakdown and left me with a very alcohol dependent abusive man. Let's use Bill for namesake, who I had assumed was my father. At the age of 5, I didn't see her again till I was 12. She picked me up, brought me to her boyfriend's house. I remember it very vividly. She gave me a bowl of ice cream and told me that Bill was not my biological father and she was sorry that she left me with him and my younger brother, Bill's biological son, in that house for so many years. My mother served in the army in the late 80s, where she was taken advantage of after she consumed alcohol by soldiers at a party. I learned this some years later in middle school and high school. I took it very rough. I was very angry, blamed her for many years for the childhood I missed out on. The feelings have changed over the years. When I was in school I was angry and saddened. Seeing fathers everywhere, at football games, grocery stores, fairs act. I wanted to be that kid on top of dad's shoulders. I wanted to be that son who was being taught things and cheered for at events. But now, after I put myself through college, I just am happy for the person I made myself become. Now I wonder biologically what the other half of me is. Is there a disease that runs in my family that I don't know about? It's really hard to this day when things tell me to put down my biological father, for schools, for joining the Navy, for the government. I just have to put John Doe. I no longer have hate in my heart for my mother. I just believe that it was brought about the wrong way, especially with the abandonment. I had a rough childhood, but I will be ready when the day comes to raise my children. I cannot wait for the day, so I can be that dad holding my child on top of my shoulders. My grandmother's mother was institutionalized for most of her life. She became pregnant with my grandma after an orderly raped her. My grandma was sent to live with her aunt who never liked her because of the shame her birth brought to the family. My grandma was an amazing person and I wish her childhood had been better. Not me, but I'm from Bangladesh, where in the early 1970s the Pakistan army conducted mass rapes across all regions leading to an entire generation of rape babies. A lot of my older cousins are rape babies and while the country's population as a whole live with it without any taboo whatsoever, the signs are always there. Some fair-skinned, some with light brown hair, some with green eyes where nobody else has anything but brown complexion and black hair eyes, and all obviously born around 1971 too. And it's quite unbelievable how no family I know of ever so much as mentions this fact in public. These kids were as loved as any other member of the family, face no social stigma and grew up to be respectable members of society. That's a surprisingly uplifting post in the context of this thread. My mom was date raped by her coworker. Apparently he was furious that she kept me. He assaulted my grandfather at one point in the pregnancy. After that, he stayed out her life until I was born and had a change of heart after. He had joint custody until they got into it about why I didn't have his last name. He got a gun out of his truck and shot at the house. I never saw him again. I learned all this at a fairly young age. I think the fact that I had seen so much already made my mom comfortable being honest. If I recall correctly, I asked her why I didn't have siblings like the rest of my friends. There's no question my mother loves me with everything she has, so I had a pretty normal only child single mother household in that sense. Most of the I just don't think about it. I'm a rape baby. Everybody's got a past. It probably helps I'm an easygoing guy. Every once in a while I watch a TV show or something and they use the word bastard. It sends a little spike through me. It's worse with Game of Thrones. My dad's last name is Stark and every other word is bastard. Maybe not exactly the response you are looking for, but as was the fashion in abusive married households in the 70s, my father raped my mother one drunken 4th of July and I was the result. My father even told my mother he didn't want any more children and to get rid of it, or I'm gone, to which my mother finally said goodbye. I like to think of it less like I was an accident and maybe more that I was the miracle my mother needed to get out of that horrible situation. I also know now what a strong and loving woman she was to make the choice to be a single mom instead of taking what could be seen as the easy way and just aborted me to stay financially stable. My mom passed away 4 years ago, but I still feel loved every day of my life thanks to her decision. That is a beautiful way to look at it. I'm glad she got out. My 5-year-old stepdaughter was a product of rape. Her mother was raped by an old boyfriend. I met her mother about 3 years ago and fell head over heels in love with her. I knew she had a child, but I thought it was from a past relationship. About 3 months into the relationship, she told me what really happened and she was so ashamed. Obviously, I was taken aback by the information, but I liked her too much that I married her 10 months later. My wife is just such an amazing woman. Her daughter, now my daughter, is the apple of my eye. She's my little angel. I still wonder if I should tell her the truth about who her biological father is. Maybe when she is an adult. Personally, I hate that dirtbag so much that I wish I'd never have to tell her about him, but I think I will have to. TLDR. Never judge a woman who's a victim of sexual assault. To all the children of rape on this thread, keep your head up and remain faithful. It's easy to feel lost. Just appreciate the ones you do have and don't let yourself be defined by something horrible. This is a throwaway account. Have a happy new year and God bless. Thank you for that TLDR. I was a victim of a lot of abuses and found dating very difficult after I finally got the courage to leave my husband. It took a while to finally find someone willing to see past my emotional and mental scars and help me work through them. Your wife is lucky to have found you. My mother is intellectually disabled, not severely so but enough that she requires some supervision. At one point, my grandparents sent her to live in a high-functioning group home. They thought it would be a good first step towards independence, because the staff were only there to help them with transportation, medical supervision, etc. My grandparents had high hopes that my mom would be able to live on her own one day. A few months into her stay, she was raped by a male staff member. She did the right thing, called my gram in secret an hour or so after it happened. Gram called the cops and got her to the air. She was too shaken up to comply with the rape kit administration. Luckily, the cops didn't tell that to my father. His dumb butt admitted to it almost instantly because he figured they had DNA on him. He was in prison for probably 7 years. Seems low, but that's not a bad term served given how few years most rapists serve. He had the gall to write me a year ago and asked to meet me and asked if I wanted to meet my half-siblings. I took great pleasure in writing only the letters LOL on a piece of paper and mailing it back to him. Never heard from him again. My childhood was great. The one silver lining here was that my mom is so childlike that she adapted a positive attitude about the whole thing. I always knew I was the product of rape, but only in very vague terms until I was older. My mom loves me dearly and worked her butt off to care for me. She was, of course, pulled out of the group home and went back to living with my gran and grandpa. When they found out she was pregnant, they asked her if she wanted to abort or adopt out. She said no. My gran told me that too many of my mom's choices and free will were taken from her the day she was assaulted. Despite my mom's intellectual abilities and emotional immaturity, my grandparents weren't about to take one more choice from her and make her give me up. My mom now does live independently and works for a vet's office as a janitor. She loves her job and got to see me graduate high school last year. She is a good mother, and I'm grateful to her and my grandparents for making the best out of a crap situation. I'm going to take a leaf out of your mother's book and be glad about the positives here. That the rapist was jailed, your mother went on to live an independent life, that you were loved and supported, and that you got to express your disgust at him trying to contact you later. Your mother sounds very sweet. Also, good luck in all your endeavors. I made a throwaway account to answer this question. I was born near Sarajevo, Bosnia, in 1994. My mother was not religious, but ethnically Bosniak, Muslim. She was imprisoned in a former school that had been converted into a sort of rape camp. She became pregnant quickly and was intentionally held there for almost 7 months so it would be too late to get an abortion. They teased her saying now she will have a Serb baby. When she was let out, she tried to find a doctor who would provide an abortion, but none would because it would likely have killed her. She tried to do that herself too, but her parents caught her. Growing up, I was raised by my grandparents. They moved to the United States, and I was always told that my parents died in the war, that my father was a soldier and my mother was killed when a shell hit her house. I only learned about 4 or 5 years ago what really happened, and that my mother is still alive and lives in Austria now, but she wants nothing to do with me, and she has completely cut my grandparents out of her life because I'm with them. I don't find it hard to deal with. It is far removed from my life. Perhaps if we were still living in Europe, it would be different. I feel good knowing I'm still related to my family, that they are my real grandparents. I would like a chance to meet my mother and to try to show her that I'm a real person and a good person, but I don't think it will happen. And I wonder about my father's family too. I don't care to meet him, I would be unwilling to do so, but he almost certainly has a perfectly decent extended family somewhere. As a Bosnian Serb, I'm so sorry. The war destroyed most of the good in people during the 1990s. I was born of rape. My mom told me when I was a very young 5 years old, and seemingly reminded me of it every day until I was 18 and flew the F out of there. I went to live in a crack house. I am and have always been sober, because it was better than living with my mom. My first name is Axel because she didn't know the name of the man that raped her, but thought she had to name me after him, and she picked a name that sounded like butthole again. She told me then when I was in kindergarten. I'm 29 now, and reached out to my mom about 6 months ago, and she told me she was perfectly fine until I tried to contact her. This is my life, folks. Edit. Thanks everyone for the support. Totally makes my day. For those who asked, my dad lives in the same town and we both avoid each other. I'm doing well for myself. Married a sweetheart. We both work at a fancy restaurant and make a lot of tips. Plans for building a real family coming soon. Edit. This story is fake. Sounds like she needs a shitload of therapy, and until she gets it, you're better off without her. I've made a throwaway to share this as most of my friends and family do not know. Only my parents, husband, sister and best friend. I have a 3-year-old daughter who was the result of rape. At the time I had been with my partner for 6 years, engaged for 3. I was working behind a bar in the city center and was raped on our staff night out. My drink had been spiked. I'm not going into great detail, but they got the guy. He had a previous record and was on probation. He has gone back to jail for a long time. He is not aware I was pregnant. My now husband was so completely and utterly supportive. We made the extremely difficult decision, with the help of my therapist, to keep the baby, and he has raised her as his own. I do not think we will ever tell her. My husband loves her like his own, and we have just welcomed our second daughter to the world 3 months ago. Honeymoon baby. She has had a normal upbringing so far, hasn't missed out. She has a father who loves her and always will. Your husband is a great man. Congratulations to both for doing something great. Throwaway. Obviously, my father raped my mother soon after my older brother was born. He wasn't drunk or anything. He just wanted to have sex and thought being married entitled him to it. I found out when I was a teenager when I asked her point blank why she didn't wait more time between having children. Because I was always embarrassed when people pointed out my brother and I were only 10 months apart. She said something like, "Your father couldn't wait," and that she tried to stop him but she was overpowered. When people find out that I'm 10 months apart from my brother, they say things like, "Oh, your parents must have really loved each other. Frick him." Ugh, that's crappy. A lot of people think rape only counts as rape if it's some evil stranger jumping out of the bushes at night. I think it's good at least as far as I've noticed, but then I'm in a liberal part of the country. There's more education, public awareness campaigns out there about marital date rape than there used to be. My friend's sister was raped and had a daughter. The guy was caught and is in prison. I asked her how they were going to explain it to her and she said they have no clue at this point. I can't imagine how hard it will be when they do tell her. She's still young. The good thing is that she, the mother, loves her more than anything, and the family does as well. Hopefully all the love she gets will offset any negative effects. No need to tell her, until she's an adult at least. If she's too young, she might think that the circumstances of her conception affect her value as a human, and kids tend to take that type of thing very hard. My brother's father was born as a result of rape. His mother has been disabled his whole life, survivor of polio, maybe only 4 feet tall. He says he never let it bother him. Obviously I didn't witness his childhood, but he's maintained upper positions in whichever field he was in. Most I've ever heard him say about it was, "Why would I even think about that sucker for a second?" It's so horrible that somebody would rape somebody so vulnerable such as your grandmother. It's so great your father became the man that is now and didn't let it affect him. I was 9 or 10 and inquisitive about the circumstances of my adoption. Turns out my biological mother was raped and couldn't deal with it. As a result of my biological mother's reaction, my older brother was put up for adoption. This was in the mid-80s, and given the odd state of social services in the UK, me and my brother were separated. I'll never know who my father is. Last year I asked my friend what she was doing for Father's Day. She said she didn't have a dad. She explained to me that her grandfather raped his daughter, my friend's real mom, and she was the result. The grandmother kicked the grandfather out of the house and she raised her daughter's child, my friend, as her own. Her mom is technically her sister. Recently, my friend's aunt, her real mom's sister, passed away and left a note in her will for my friend. In the letter, her aunt explained who her real father and mother were. The grandfather, her real dad, has since passed. Her real mother and grandmother don't know that my friend now knows her parentage. My friend does not want to tell her real mom that she knows. She is apparently happy with how her family has adjusted and doesn't want it to change. She has a good sister relationship with her real mom. Hope that makes sense. My parents divorced before I was born. I already had a sister who was about 2 years older than me. I knew that my father was extremely, violently abusive to my mom. They grew up, met, and got married in Minnesota, but they moved to Louisiana at some point because my mom's brothers kept beating my father up when my mom showed up with bruises, broken bones, etc. My father promised they'd have a new start in a new state, but of course that didn't happen, and instead she was isolated from her family, not allowed to have friends, and the abuse got even worse. Apparently he absolutely doted on my sister, though, never got angry or raised his voice or anything. But when she was pregnant with me, he continued abusing her and at one point pushed her down the stairs, not to cause a miscarriage, just normal abuse. So she finally got the courage to leave. She got a divorce, went back to Minnesota and lived with her parents, and put herself through nursing school. She married my stepfather when I was about 2. I never had any contact with my father or anyone on that side of my family. Apparently my grandma had sent birthday and Christmas presents for the first couple of years, but that was it. So I knew all of this. My sister had a baby right out of high school. This is a whole separate sad story, but she abandoned her mixed race daughter to marry a white supremacist, and my parents had been raising my niece. A couple of years later, at the age of 28, I suddenly got a message from my father on Facebook. I didn't want anything to do with him, but my parents were in the midst of a custody battle with my niece's father, so I was afraid that he'd contact my sister and everything would get even worse. So I called my stepdad. He was convinced that I wanted to get to know my father, even though I kept insisting that I didn't. So he finally said, "Megan, your father violently raped your mother and that's why you're here." It was like a punch to the gut. I knew he was awful, but I never thought about being conceived through rape. And I remembered every time someone would comment that my sister looked like my mom but I didn't look like my mom or dad, stepfather, and my mom would get this awful look on her face. I haven't said anything to her about it. I doubt my stepfather has, either. It's been 2 years and I still haven't really come to terms with it. Dang, that's rough. Hope it gets better. My great-grandmother worked on a sugarcane plantation in Trinidad and was raped by the foreman. Is that the right term? She had my grandfather and shunned him, abandoned him at the plantation where he was raised on the charity of the other indentured servants while she went off and married and had 3 other boys. To make a long story short is he did reconcile with her but she treated him like crap, wasn't educated, starved him, and was the only one to be physically abused. Ninja edit to add the only reason she took him into her house was because her brother threatened to beat her. I'm sure that only added to her resentment of him. The product of all that was his 8 children, 15 grandchildren whom he cherished. Let us know that he loved us and never raised his hand to. When he died, a little of us all died with him. Frick, I miss him so much. This tore my heart out. I love to see when people break the cycle. My mother was abusive both physically and verbally. I have never hit my child or said a harsh word to her. I never will. I do discipline her and scold her when she is in the wrong. but always with love and respect. My mother had me when she was 17. She always told me that my father was this one man she had been dating, Ron. He said he was sterile and couldn't be my father. He had nothing to do with me growing up other than contacting me once when I was 16. He disappeared shortly after that. I finally found him a few years ago and we decided to do a DNA test because he still maintained he was sterile and he was sure my mother was seeing other people when they were dating. As a side note, my mother was very promiscuous and is known to embellish his stories a lot. The DNA test came back with a 0% probability that he was the father. I sent the results to my mother and she didn't speak to me for 2 years. When we started speaking again only after the death of my brother, I asked her if she wanted to talk about it. She told me that her parents would take her to cocktail parties where she was the entertainment, if you know what I mean. It was during one of those encounters she became pregnant with me. I believe her, that her parents did prostitute her out and because she was 17 and made to do it by her parents, she was raped. We were never close and I could never be as good as my brother was in her eyes. He did everything right and I was just not as good. Our relationship has always been strained. She never loved on me. No hugs and kisses. I don't remember her telling me she loves me as a child. I recently went to care for her after she said she had a stroke. She never thanked me for quitting my job and leaving my family to care for her in another state. She never thanked me for the things I did for her while I was there or the sacrifices I made to be there. She never showed any appreciation that I was there. She told me every day how wonderful my brother had been. She lived with him up until his death. How he did all these things for her. All day long I heard about how he took her to the desert and they hiked and collected rocks. Even though I took her there while I was helping her. Growing up she was a drug addict and alcoholic who got sober when I was 13. She was never emotionally available to me even after she was sober. In a way, she was worse after she got sober than when she was using. I don't know if my experience would have been different if I had been born in different circumstances or not, but I think she always knew how I had been conceived, at least subconsciously, and resented me because of it. TLDR. My mom was the main event at parties her parents made her attend and I was never as good as my brother because of it. I was about 12 years old. My mom must have told my siblings before me. I distinctly remember we were all sitting around the TV and my little sister and I were bickering about something and she turned around and said, "Well, at least I am not a rape baby." My mother didn't even say anything. Not to me or her. It would have been nice if she had told her to not say things like that or something. Later on when I complained about it she told me, "Well, you were," and that was the last time we talked about it. Asked my sister what happened. She said our biological dad supposedly raped her 2 years after she divorced him, and when she got pregnant she decided to keep me. Crap, the offhand nature makes it even worse. My son was the product of rape. His father was a friend that I trusted. I never told the police. I never told my family. I would rather they see me as someone who made a bad choice. My son is almost 3, and I would go through all of it again. He has been the best thing to ever happen to me. I'm engaged to an amazing man and I'm almost done with my bachelor's and will be on my way to a master's right after that. As to if I'll ever tell him, yeah, if he asks, if he feels the need to know about his father, but I will never speak ill of him. That was my pain, and from it came the joy of my life. That was my pain, and from it came the joy of my life. That is beautiful. You sound like an amazing person. Wishing your soon-to-be family all the happiness life has to offer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.